Let's look into how to calculate midpoints using arithmetic or math calculations. And what we're going to do essentially is we're going to be dividing by 2. So what does dividing by 2 do? Let's do a quick recap. If I have a total number of objects, so let's say this is my total number of objects, and I split that into 2 equal groups, that's essentially what dividing by 2 is. Dividing by 2 will tell me how many items I'll have in each group. So let's do an example. Let's say I have 10 marbles here. If I were to divide 10 marbles by 2, it means I'm splitting it into 2 equal groups. I would have 5 marbles here and 5 marbles here. So to write that as an equation, I would start with the total 10, dividing it into 2 equal groups, and that will get me 5, which is the number in each group. So to repeat, this is the total, the 2 is the number of groups, and then 5 is the number of items in each group. So when we're calculating midpoints, we're following that same logic. Let's say I have a 2x4 board, for example, and I know the total length of that board. Let's say it's 10 feet. That's very long, I know. Let's say it's 10 feet, and I want to know the midpoint. Well, I'm taking this entire length and I'm splitting it into 2 equal groups. This would be 5 feet, and this would be 5 feet. So I'm essentially going 10 divided by 2 equals 5. And dividing by 2 will be the theme of our video today. So let's erase what I wrote down here so we can do this example together. This example reads, a 2x4 board is 43 3/4 of an inch long. Calculate the midpoint. Now my advice for you here is whenever you're working with board problems, when dimensions are given to you, draw a visual, draw a picture. So here's my picture. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Here's my 2x4. Okay, and the length of my 2x4 is 43 3/4 of an inch. We're going to be working with fractions a lot in this video and the next one. So if you need a recap on how to convert from fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction, how to divide fractions, please watch the review videos at the beginning of each module. So now I have my visual. The midpoint is going to be somewhere around here. So I want to know what's the distance from here to here. And that's going to be the same thing, the same distance as from here to here. Okay, so I know that I'm going to be dividing by 2 because I'm taking this measure and I'm splitting it into 2 equal pieces. So I can easily put this into my calculator right off the bat, but I'd like to try to estimate it first. So to estimate 43 3/4 of an inch divided by 2, I am going to round. Okay, I'm going to take this number and round it to the closest even number. Okay, now I'm choosing an even number because it's easier to divide even numbers by 2 than it is by dividing odd numbers. So 43 3/4, it's between 2 numbers. It's between the number 43 and 44. So 43 3/4 is around here. So it's closer to 44. So I'm going to round up to 44. So my number will be 44 approximately divided by 2. Or I can ask myself, what is half of 44? And the answer is 22 inches. So the midpoint will be around 22 inches. Now, if you didn't know how to do this in your head, that's totally fine. You can use your calculator for that. You can go 44 divided by 2. Okay? So this is my estimate. My estimate should be close to my exact answer. And now my next step is to actually find the precise value, the actual midpoint, not the estimate. So I'm going to take 43 inches and 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to divide it by 2. Now there's multiple ways to do this. One way is to take this number and convert it into an improper fraction and then do fraction division. That's totally fine. You can also take this, convert it to decimal, and then divide by 2 using your calculator. That's also okay. If your calculator can do fraction division this way, you can do that too. I am going to convert this to a decimal because right now I'm not assessing you on your fraction operations. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into decimal. Now remember that video that I showed you earlier, how to convert from mixed number to decimal. I'm going to keep this number as it is, and I'm going to convert this into a decimal. 3 over 4 is the same thing as 3 divided by 4. Okay, so you plug that into your calculator and you should get 0.75. And then you add these two together. So 43 and 3/4 is equal to 43.75. And then I take that and I divide it by 2. And now 43 divided by 75 divided by 2 is 21.875 inches. Now that's how you would solve this using decimals. Now I will show you how to solve this using fractions as well, because I'd like you to know as many methods as possible. And also sometimes if you're using an inch ruler, you want to keep your answer in fraction form, not in decimal form. So let me show you how to do this. If you have 43 and 3/4 divided by 2, you're going to want to convert this into an improper fraction. I have a video on how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to multiply these two together. 43 times 4 is equal to 172. And then you add it to 3 and you get 175. So as an improper fraction, this is equal to 175 over 4. Your denominator does not change. Then what you do is you take this number and now you divide it by 2. Now dividing by 2 in fractions is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So we change the division to a multiplication and we flip this number and it turns into 1/2. Okay? Now after we do that, we're going to multiply these fractions. So what we do essentially is we multiply the numerators together and we multiply the denominators together. So 175 times 1 is 175 over 4 times 2 is 8. Now this is okay, but this is a bit hard to understand. It's a bit hard to visualize on a ruler, so I'm going to change it into a mixed number. And I also have a step-by-step video on how to do that. So the denominator stays the same. I'm going to divide 175 by 8 and I get 21 point blah blah blah. I don't care about the decimals, I just care about the 21. So I'm going to put that here. So I have 21 whole numbers and then a fraction over 8. How do I know what this number is? We multiply these two together. 21 times 8, we get 168. Okay? 168. How many more do I need to add to get to 175, which is this number right here? You can subtract them. 175 minus 168, and that's 7. Okay? Now double check your answer. Go 8 times 21 plus 7. You should get 175. And that's the answer in fraction form. Now I will say, if fractions are numbers that intimidate you a little bit, a lot of calculators, scientific calculators, they can actually convert decimals into fractions for you. And that's totally fine. Just find a teacher and they will show you how to convert this to a fraction like this using your calculator. Okay, now let's do another example. In this example, we have Macy. Macy wants to drill halfway through a 2x4 piece of lumber, which is 1.5 inches thick. How deep should she drill? So let's start by drawing a visual here. This is the plane of wood. And the thickness from here to here, I'm going to do it in another color, is 1 and 1.5 inches. I want to know what is the midpoint, straight in the middle. So if I want to just zoom in to this part here, I'm going to draw a line and I'm going to say from here to here it's 1.5, and I want to know what the midpoint is right here. Okay, so essentially I'm going 1.5 divided by 2. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to show you the decimal way first. 1.5 is equal to 1.5. You can use the method I showed you earlier. Divided by 2, and that should give us 0.75. Okay, now you can convert that into a fraction, and that fraction would be 3/4 of an inch. Okay, now I left some room at the top. This is the final answer, by the way. I left some room at the top because I want to do this using fractions as well. So if you convert this to an improper fraction, you get 3/2 divided by 2. That's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, so flip this one. That gives us 3/4 inches. So this is the midpoint of 1.5. Let's do another example. This one is a little bit more complicated. So where should a board 4 feet and 5.5 inches long be cut to obtain 2 equal lengths? So what we're looking for is the midpoint of this. And the reason why I said this is complicated a little bit is because our measurement is a combination of 2 units. It's in feet and inches. Now again, there's multiple ways in which we can approach this. I'm going to go with the simplest way that I can see right now, which is just combining the units together. I'm going to convert the feet into inches, and then I'm going to combine it with this number. Okay, so I'm going to take 4 feet, convert it to inches, and then add it to 5.5 inches. So what is 4 feet in inches? Well, I have to multiply by 12 because 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. So that would be 48 inches. So 48 inches plus 5.5 inches, that gives me 53.5 inches. So I need to find the midpoint of 53.5. So I'm going to take 53.5 and I'm going to divide it by 2. That means I'm going to take 53.5 and I'm going to divide it by 2. So 53.5 divided by 2 is equal to 26.75 inches. Okay, now if I want to convert that to fraction, that would be 26.75 of an inch. Now, could I also represent that in feet? Absolutely. For now, this is the final answer in inches. The question doesn't ask me to write my answer in feet and inches, but if they did, it's very simple to do. You can just take your 26 inches here. Let me do that in green. And you can divide by 12. So when you divide by 12, you get 2 whole numbers. So that would be 2 feet. And then you're left with some remainder. So that remainder is 0.166666. Multiply that by 12. And that will give you 2 inches. So it will be 2 3/4 inches. Now I know this part is a bit confusing, okay? But I don't want you to worry too much about the decimals and stuff. I'm going to show you a much easier way. So, you know how you have 26 inches? Let's see where I can write this. I'm going to write it over here in this corner because I'm running out of room, okay? So you have 26 inches, right? And you want to regroup it into feet. So I'm going to subtract 12 inches because I know that these 12 inches will get me 1 foot. Okay, well now how many inches do I have left? I have 14 inches left. I have 1 foot and 14 inches. Now take away another 12. So that means I have 1 foot now. That leaves me with 2 inches. So what's the final answer after I regroup? I have 2 feet and 2 inches. So let's write that down. So 2 feet and 2 inches. But remember, we also have that 3/4 right here. So we're going to put 3/4, okay? I'm going to erase this. I'm going to put 3/4. So I think this may be a little bit easier than working with decimals and remainders and all of that. Okay? Now, let's move on to a few practice questions. I'd like you to pause the video in a minute once I finish talking. And I'd like you to solve these problems in your notebook What you're doing is you're calculating the midpoint of every single measure. Don't worry about regrouping here, just keep the units the same, okay? Just find the midpoints, and then when you're done, play so that you can see the answers. So you may pause now. Okay, and if you're ready to see the solutions, here they are. I represented the solutions in decimals and fractions depending on which way you preferred answering this. So if you got stuck, if you need more help, please find a teacher first before moving on to the second part of this video.